Hi everyone, and welcome to our video series on the Formative Assessment Toolkit for Literacy. I'm Stephanie McCulley, and I'm the ELA and Secondary Social Sciences Consultant for the Eastern Township School Board. And in this video, I'll be sharing some ideas about what it looks like when we use one, some, or all of the tools curated in the Formative Assessment Toolkit for Literacy to help support us when we're making instructional decisions in the classroom. So as explored in the previous videos, in the series, the Formative Assessment Toolkit for Literacy includes a monitoring tool for developing readers, a reader response continuum, a writing continuum based on the 5 traits, 2 writing conventions continuum, 1 for spelling and 1 for punctuation, and finally a narrative writing continuum. Teachers are free to use all or a selection of these tools to support them when tracking student learning, formatively assessing, and providing feedback to students. In all of the videos, we mentioned some of the practical applications of the tools that were featured in each video, but they were pretty general comments, and we wanted to come back to, now having seen the tools, how all of them might play into your cycle of instructional decisions. So the cycle of instructional decisions are, what do I expect my students to learn? How will I know if they've learned it? How will I respond if they don't learn it or haven't learned it? And how will I respond if they already know it? We wanted to take a look at what those tools could look like in the classroom a little more specifically, how they might impact your planning, instruction, and assessment. I asked a teacher about how they were using these tools in the classroom related to the cycle of instructional decisions. And the first thing they told me was how the continuums were helpful in identifying learning targets when designing their lessons. So identifying clear learning targets at the outset for students is so important to their success, but crafting clear learning targets can be difficult. And the continuums help this teacher to come up with the right skill, the language to be able to identify some targets related to the unit the teacher wanted to teach. Then we talked a little bit about how the continuums could be used after the students started to produce work related to the learning targets identified. And the teacher shared that they found it useful to keep a copy of sort of each continuum for each student to track their individual progress. And they felt that these continuums could sort of be passed on to the next grade level teacher to ease the transition between the grades. And she also mentioned that she had added a copy of each continuum to the students' individual learning portfolios and had them track their own progress over time as they acquired their new skills in reading and writing. They felt this was a great way to encourage self-reflection, and it opened the door to many conversations about learning as progress and setting goals. And I suggested that she might also create master copies, sort of 1 copy of each continuum for the class, where she could track the whole group's progress in general. So just to give herself an indication of what skills she could focus on next for whole group instruction when the majority of the class starts to show mastery of a skill consistently over time. When we were talking, she discussed with me how helpful she found the continuums in being able to provide her students with specific feedback related to the learning targets she established at the start of the unit. She guided her feedback with the continuum so it was specific and actionable for her students. And she also used the continuums in her conferences with students so she could visualize where they needed to go. These conferences were really about progress, so students were very engaged and motivated to get to the next stage. And she felt this was different from when she gave students work back with a grade, which sometimes they were maybe disappointed by the grade or and maybe sort of demotivated by. Finally, what this teacher especially liked about the tools, though, were that they provided a common ground for her and her cycle team to determine what represented reasonable expectations in reading and writing for their students. And they found them really helpful in sort of aligning these expectations. An added bonus to tracking student progress on the tools was that the teacher was able to then readily access reasonable and actionable goals for student IEPs. And they helped with giving the resource teacher that worked with their class very clearly identified skills to work with to move certain students with special needs forward in the continuum. That they shared information using these continuums helped both her and the resource teachers. And you could think about, HSAs or SETs or any sort of party that might be working with your class. By sharing the information on these continuums, it helped them sort of be really intentional when it came to designing interventions for specific students. This video discussed how these tools, and you can see the tools that are included in the Formative Assessment Toolkit here, how they support the cycle of instructional decisions in the classroom. This video is meant to synthesize the ideas around formative assessment that all the videos in the series touch on, and the continuums it refers to, again, are all part of the Formative Assessment Toolkit for Literacy, that curated collection of tools. So thank you for joining us today. If you liked this video, don't forget, hopefully you've watched the other videos in the series at this point, but check them out again. And if you have further questions or you want access to the Formative Assessment Toolkit, reach out to your language arts consultant for support.